This is another exclusive rock music star interview. Conducted by Thomas S. ORWAT Jr.
Welcome to the Rock Interview Series, episode number 26. I'm Thomas ORWAT Jr., and it's June 28th, 2021, and I have bassist songwriter Rocky Newton as my guest. Rocky is currently in the British rock band called Lionheart, which also features former Iron Maiden guitarist Dennis Stratton, former McAuley Schenker guitarist Steve Mann, former UFO drummer Clive Edwards, and vocalist Lee Small. Lionheart released an incredible 13-track melodic rock masterpiece entitled The Reality of Miracles in July of 2020. Rocky is probably most known for his time in the McAuley Schenker group. Rocky was in the band from 1986 to 1991 and appeared on the McAuley Schenker records Perfect Timing and Save Yourself. In addition, Rocky also sang backup vocals on the multi-platinum selling record Hysteria by Def Leppard. We discuss all of this and much, much more in the following interview. So get ready, here he is, Rocky Newton. Hey everyone, welcome to episode number 26 of the Rock Interview Series. And we have another great special guest today. We have none other than Rocky Newton with us. And Rocky is the bass player in the group Lionheart currently. And he also made some great records with the McAuley Schenker. And we're going to try to cover it all today, Rocky. How does that sound?
Sounds good.
All right, good. Well, first question I have for you, Rocky, is when was the last time you were able to perform on stage?
I think that was 2019 in April, out in Milan, Italy. I played the Frontiers Music Festival with Air Race, the band Air Race, which I was a member of. I don't think I've done one since then. There might have been another Air Race one, but I think that was it. So it's been too long. You know? I've got all my guitars sitting here and nobody to play with.
Oh wow! I'm looking at. I can kind of see. It looks like you have the Union Jack bass there. Is that
Yeah.
right? Oh wow!
That's This is the guy that I used on all the McAuley Schenker stuff.
Yeah. Wow, that's incredible. Can you play a note for us? Oh, that's awesome. Thanks for showing. Oh wow.
Same. But I don't really play that one too much. It kind of looks great, but doesn't sound that.
Well, I wasn't expecting to do that right from the beginning, but that's great. Thanks so much for showing me those signature bass guitars that you have. That's awesome. The Union Jack one, how long have you had that? I know you said you played it. I remember seeing that in the McAuley Schenker videos. Did you have that?
I got that in 86 or 80. I think it was actually 87. So right when we were just starting to do the Perfect Timing album.
Right.
It's made by a company called ORWAT, who are quite a small company in the north of England that handmade guitars, and I just love the shape of it. It didn't come that color scheme. It was in fact, it was a fantastic blue kind of tiger maple, fantastic finish, and I completely ruined it by painting it red, white, and blue. But
I don't think you've ruined it. I think it looks great. That is definitely your signature X for sure. Okay, so we got off track a little bit on the interview. We'll get back to the timeline. I just saw the bass guitars and I got real excited about it. So we'll get back to the main interview. Now, although you weren't haven't played since 2019, your band Lionheart released a record in 2020, and it really is an amazing record. Tell me a little bit about the making of that particular record. Did you write most of that during the lockdown, or was there?
Yeah, it was pretty much all written and recorded remotely during lockdown. Steve Mann, who's in Lionheart with me and also still plays with Michael Schenker, he lives in Germany and he has his own studio there, so he produced everything. We pretty much, I've got a little studio here at home, and I record my parts and then I send them by WeTransfer over to Steve and he drops them in the main track, and then Clive does his drum parts, Dennis does his guitar parts, Lee does his vocal parts, all the same. It was literally, there weren't ever more than, you know, were never two of us even in a room together at the same time for recording that album, which, you know, not an ideal way to work. The album previous to that, Second Nature, was done in a similar way, just by virtue of the fact that Steve lives in a different country, and so it's logistically impossible to you know, the cost wise to do it. But we did we drove over to Germany to do all the three-part harmonies, which is kind of the Lionheart signature sound, is the three-part harmonies of Dennis, Steve, and myself singing. And so we wanted to be all in the same room and to kind of feed back off each other, and you know, and actually lock that in. But we did our part separately on Reality of Miracles, and it seemed to work because, you know, I guess we've known each other so long, and Steve is such a great arranger for the harmonies that he would just work out the parts, and he would send me my part and then send Dennis his part, and we'd just record them, and then he'd just do the magic and put them all together. So
Yeah, the thing about Lionheart is you guys are pretty popular over there overseas in Europe, but not so much here in the United States. So I really want my audience here to, after they watch this interview, to know all about Lionheart. Great bunch of musicians. It's a great band. You actually formed the band in what, 1980, right? Originally.
yeah, it was the tail end of 1980. That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. So
We played our
that
first show in January '81.
right, and that band stayed together until 1986, and that's when you joined McAuley Schenker.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. I mean, the core of Lionheart was Dennis, Steve, and myself. We did have, you know, we had a few singers. We got fed up trying to find the perfect singer that would just fit the sound we were going for, and so we ended up actually Dennis and me sharing the lead vocals, and we were a four-piece for a while. And then we got a guy called Chad Brown when we signed with CBS, and went out to California, went out to LA, and recorded our first album at Sound City there with Kevin Beamish producing, who had just come off REO Speedwagon and a bunch of other stuff. And Chad did a great job on that. But then, you know, that we just, I don't know, we seem to suffer from the problem that we were promised all these tours by CBS. We were supposed to be going out on the road with all these bands that then one by one, it just sort of fell apart. It never happened. The record sold really well in Japan, but didn't really do much in America, and sold moderately well in Europe. And then, you know, I got a call from Michael Schenker to go out to Germany, and Lionheart was kind of still bubbling under, but nothing was really going on. And I think Dennis had joined Praying Mantis, and so I kind of jumped ship and went on board with MSG, and then I got Steve into MSG because they needed a second guitarist, keyboard player. And so it kind of went on from there. But then you kind of fast forward. We always had this feeling of unfinished business with Lionheart, and in 2016, I got a message over Facebook from the promoters of a festival in the UK here called the Rockingham Festival, which is an AOR festival, and the two guys that ran it there were huge Lionheart fans, and always kind of wondered, well, what happened to Lionheart? You know, what's going on? Is there any chance you guys would reform as a one-off to do the gig? And so I phoned everybody, and everybody was up for doing it except for Chad, the singer, who left the music business and just actually wasn't interested anymore. And so we thought, right, we've got to get a singer, and we asked around and some of our contacts, and there were several names came up. And then we found Lee Small, who is the most amazing singer. I mean, just fantastic. We were so happy to find him, and a great writer as well, and a lovely guy. And so Lee's been with us since we kind of kicked it all back into gear again. Well, getting on for 5 years ago now. 5 years and 2 albums later. So.
What are the band dynamics? Is there one person in the band that you consider to be the leader of the band, or is it a true democracy?
You know, I think we are genuinely a true democracy. I mean, Dennis, Steve, and I have been, you know, we've known each other since 1980. So, you know, it's over 40 years now of playing together, and you know, we weren't always in the same band. We always kept in touch, and it's a democracy, but we all have defined roles. Like Steve is you know, he's the studio whiz. He's the musical genius. He's one of these guys that you could give him a new instrument and let him play around with it for an hour and he'd be able to play something on it. You know, he's a truly, genuinely talented musician. And Dennis is kind of the heart of the Lion. He's very emotional, very just his kind of love and enthusiasm for everything we do just sort of shines through, and he's the driving force from that perspective. And obviously he brings with him his whole Maiden you know, kind of background, and he brings all that to the party. And then I'm in charge of a lot of the business side of stuff. I keep the band bank accounts and that stuff. And yet we all know no one person is kind of more important than the other. We have the defined roles, but then, you know, we all discuss everything, and it's always a majority decision. We'll draw up a short list of songs for the album, and it doesn't matter who's written them. There's no kind of, oh well, I want my song on there, or this, that, and the other. We put all the songs down in a rough demo form, and then we send them around to all the 5 band members, and we all vote on them and score them out of 10. And the you know, the 10 or 12 songs that end up in the album are the ones that got the high scores, and that's the way it works. And it works well, you know.
Yeah. Do you guys write a lot for when it's time to record a record, or are you a band where you just, you know, write maybe like a few extra songs and what's necessary?
We write a lot more than ends up on the album. A lot of them. I mean, I write a lot of stuff that's, you know, maybe just riff. I'll come up with what I think is a great riff or a verse and a chorus or something, but it not necessarily a finished song. And I'll send it to Steve or Lee, and Lee will come up with some vocal part on it, which I'd never imagined, and takes the song in a completely different direction. And then Steve will come in and put in, you know, change the verse part, the bridge part, and add a middle 8 or something. And then it ends up being, you know, very much a collaboration. There's very few songs that's just one person that comes in with a finished song, music, lyric, melody, and everything. It's, you know, they all get put through the Lionheart mill and then come out the other end with a bit of input from everybody, you know.
Yeah. Has there been any talk about possibly you know, promoting Lionheart a little more aggressively in North America?
Well, that's what we're hoping would happen. I mean, we right just before COVID hit, we signed with a company in Germany called Flying Dolphin Entertainment for management, a guy called Holger Koch, and his record company Metalville, which is what the last album came out on the Metalville label. But the problem is that they just haven't been able to get anything going. You know, it's just been dead. I mean, we really would love to get out to America again, and you know, and do all that. I mean, Lionheart have never played a gig in America. You know, with the irony is we recorded our first album in LA. You know, but we never actually yet to play a gig there. We've played, you know, we've been to Japan, we've been all over Europe, the UK, and everywhere. But no, so it's something which is in our sights. We'd love to do it. But it's kind of tough, and then, you know, at the level we're at, of course, there's the cost implication of getting working visas and all that stuff to do it properly, and so, you know, it has to be right.
Yeah, it's one of those unfortunate things where, like, you know, your band is very talented. You're putting out great music. I think there's a lot of people that would really enjoy your music in the States and in North America. It's amazing melodic rock. I mean, it has a lot of commercial appeal, I believe. So it's
Yeah.
you know, I'm rooting for you guys. I really am. I'd love to see you make a splash over here.
Yeah, well, I'd say we'd love to. We need a promoter or somebody to take a chance on us, or get a nice support slot, or you know, that would be the ideal way to introduce ourselves to the American audience. But I have no idea how the business is over there. I hear just anecdotally a lot of sort of American friends, they all can't wait to come to Europe because they think the scene is so much better over here. And I think it's a case of everybody thinks the grass is greener, you know.
How did you get involved in the McAuley Schenker group, I should say?
And I was asleep in bed and the phone went, and I went, and I sort of woke up, still rubbing my eyes, half awake, picked the phone up, and this voice said, "Oh, is that Rocky?" Rocky, I said, "Yeah." I'm not going to try and do the accent. He said, "Oh, this is Michael Schenker," and I thought it was one of my friends, like, and I just said, "Oh, expletive off," you know, like, and then I kind of woke up, realized it really was him. I thought, oh, and he explained how he got my number, which was from a friend of a friend, and he just said, I'm going over to, he was living in London, he was going over to Hanover to his brother Rudolph's studio the following week, and he'd got a drummer, he needed a bass player to demo some new songs, and was I interested in doing it? And so I said, yeah, damn right I am. So, and that was it. And literally a week later, I went the next day, I think, to meet him at his flat in London, and went through some songs, and then went over to Hanover the following week, and I spent, I don't know, 2 or 3 weeks out there. We rehearsed in the Scorpions rehearsal room. Then we went to Rudolph's house, to his home studio, and did a bunch of demos there. But he didn't have a singer at the time, and he wanted to get these backing tracks down and then use those backing tracks to audition a singer. He wanted to audition a singer in the studio as opposed to just getting somebody coming into a rehearsal situation, so they could really kind of focus on, you know, what the voice really sounded like. And they did that, and then after the backing tracks were done, I came back to England, and then they spent the next 2 or 3 months auditioning singers. They had a load in, and that's when they got Robin in. He was, I think, last in, and that was quite a tough, I think, audition for all the singers. They had to come in and learn some of the old MSG stuff, and then they were there for 2 days, and Michael would literally throw a backing track at them and say, right, go back to the hotel, come up with a melody and some lyrics for that, and we'll record it tomorrow. And luckily for Robin, he's really good at that stuff, and just coming up with something pretty much on the fly. And I can't remember which song it was, but I'm sure it was a song which ended up on Perfect Timing. But so then Robin was then in the band, and then a few weeks later, I got called back to, you know, when it was now a complete band, actually minus the drummer that did the demos. Didn't do it. There were a couple of different drummers, and then we ended up auditioning and found Bodo, and then that was the lineup was then complete. Yeah.
Yeah, you the record came out. The record was called Perfect Time and came out in 1987. You have 3 co-writes on that record, and you were responsible for co-writing the first single, "Give Me Your Love," which actually we became a top 40 single here in America on active radio. Tell me a little bit about that song and how that song came about.
Well, it was just I wrote all the music, and Robin wrote the words and the melody, and it was basically just it was an idea I had, which I just demoed myself, and I played it to Robin. Robin came up with that with the words, and then we played it to the band, and the band liked it, and we had, again, it was a situation similar to Lionheart. We probably had a good 20 songs that were in the running for Perfect Timing, and then Andy Johns, who was producing, came over, and we started pre-production in Hanover. And basically, we're in the rehearsal room. We ran through all the songs we have, and he would write down, yeah, that's a possible. Yeah, don't like that one, and drew up the list, and that was on the list, and then made it to the album. And yeah, I was super excited and really happy when the record company chose it as the lead single, as you can imagine. So, because, you know, I didn't know coming into the band whether any of my songs would even be considered. I thought Michael would maybe want to, you know, just write all the songs himself. But in those days, he was very, very open to that. I think it's kind of come full circle again nowadays. I see on the last 2 or 3 albums, they're all, you know, they're all, he writes all the music. He doesn't like really playing other people's music, but he was very open to it in those days. I mean, on Perfect Timing, I had 3 co-writes, and on Save Yourself, the next one, I had 4. So yeah, so that was great for me, and you know, a great opportunity. So
Yeah, the other one was Love Is Not a Game, and that was another song that I believe was released as a video, wasn't it?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And in fact, there were 3 singles off the album, and I think they were all the 3 that I had a hand in co-writing. So that was kind of cool. Time was the other one, the ballad.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, which that was a weird one, because that was Michael and Robin had written this song, but it was basically the verse and the bridge section, and it didn't have a chorus. And they played it, and I'm going, well, that's really nice, but I said, but it's got to have a chorus, because it doesn't. There's no kind of, you know, focus to the song. It's just this great little verse, but it doesn't go anywhere. It doesn't do anything. And we had a break for the weekend, and over the weekend I took a tape of this, and I just started singing along to it, and came up with this idea. And then in the rehearsal room on the Monday morning again, where I said, play the song, and then the tape stopped, and then I sang my idea to Michael, who was holding the guitar, and played it, and and there was the chorus. And so then it just finished the song off, you know.
Mm-hmm. Is it easy to work with Michael Schenker and Robin McAuley? Was it a kind of like a chill back atmosphere, or?
Yeah, it was fine in those days. You know, it was. I mean, you know, I'd known Robin for quite a while, so we were really good friends. I mean, and Michael was cool to work with. You know, he was very, very focused in those. I mean, when I first joined the band, he was teetotal. He wasn't drinking or anything, and so he was totally together, really focused. And he'd actually said to us, look, one of his issues. I mean, you know, I'm not breaking any confidences or whatever, but I say it's public record that he's had his issues with alcohol and other things. And he made it quite clear that, you know, as far as he was concerned, one of the reasons for that was because all the pressure was on him, being the Michael Schenker group and everything, and he wanted it to be more of a band. He wanted to sort of, you know, share that responsibility amongst the band members, and in particular with the singer, and have a good partnership, which is why the band ended up being called the McAuley Schenker Group. Even though, you know, Robin says that was not his kind of plan, but that's what Michael wanted, and so, you know, that's the way it worked out. And yeah, it wasn't a democracy. It was the McAuley Schenker Group, and then there were the three other guys in the band, but that was fine. You know, we were happy with that arrangement. We weren't signed to the record company, that they were, but you know, it was just a wonderful opportunity, and you know, and I had songs that I was contributing that were being used, and so I'm not going to complain at that. You know, that was great.
Yeah, it almost seems like since you were responsible for writing 3 of the first singles, that maybe they should have changed it to McAuley Schenker Newton group.
Well, nice, but I wouldn't. You know, that's for other people to say, not me.
Yeah. I had one of your bandmates on a few episodes back, Mitch Perry, and he was telling me about, yeah, Mitch is a great guy. He was telling me about some of those tours that you guys went on for that first record, and it's really incredible, some of the bands you supported. Tell me a little bit about touring with some of those bands. Like, for instance, Rush. You guys went out on quite a few dates with Rush.
Yeah, we did. I mean, you know, there was a big debate at the time whether Rush were actually the right band for us to be out on the road with, because it's not really the same kind of audience, you know, that we were going for. But having said that, we did really well on that tour, and Rush were total gentlemen. They were, you know, it was fantastic atmosphere. I think Michael knew the guys in Rush quite well because UFO had done quite a lot of touring with them back in the day, and I think Alex was quite a fan of Michael's guitar playing, and they were great. I think on that whole tour, I don't remember ever having a conversation with Neil. I think he kind of kept himself to himself, but Geddy and Alex were super friendly and would pop into the dressing room and see, make sure we got everything we needed and everything was going well. So yeah, it's just nothing but great memories from that tour. That's great. After the Rush tour, we went out. I'm trying to think of the chronology of this.
Was it Whitesnake?
We went out by ourselves, and we had Black Crowes opening up for us. They just released Shake Your Moneymaker, and we're literally just starting in their ascendancy, and they opened up for us. And we toured with Great White. Great White were headlining. We were middle band, and there was a band called Havana Black from Finland who were opening up. Then we had various other bands opening up for us. Killer Dwarfs were one, I remember. Armored Saint. I'm trying to think who else we actually toured with. I don't think there were any other arena tours that we did opening up for somebody, unless I've forgotten, which is quite likely.
Mm-hmm. The next record came out on October 10th, 1989, and it was called Save Yourself. Tell me a little bit about that, recording that record.
We had Andy Johns for Perfect Timing, who was fantastic to work with. I mean, the guy was a legend, and the stories he told us were amazing. But then we've got, we had Frank Filippetti, who just done Foreigner, and the big difference for us doing Save Yourself was we recorded that in LA, whereas Perfect Timing had pretty much been done in Europe. We came out to LA to do a few overdubs, and it was mixed in LA, but we started off in Denmark, and then did a lot of recording at Rudolf Schenker's home studio in Hanover. But then with Save Yourself, by this point, I was living out in LA, and I think Michael and Robin had moved out by that point. And so it was pretty much all recorded in LA, and so that gave it a different vibe. And Frank Filippetti, who was a New Yorker, he came out to LA for the album, and yeah, it was a joy to work with Frank. I mean, completely opposite character to Andy Johns. Andy was just like a larger than life guy who came from the era of the 70s excesses, with Zeppelin and the Stones and Free and all this stuff. So it was hard keeping up with Andy, but Frank was much more kind of work focused, and it was more a kind of a almost office hours job. You came in here and you focused and you did what you needed to do. But yeah, it was good. I mean, they're both very different albums for me, and I don't know whether I prefer one over the other. I just like them for what they are. They're just different.
Yeah, you guys had a pretty successful single on that one, in Anytime. That one reached number 5 on the I think it was active rock charts at the time. Great song. That song I hear all the time right now on satellite radio, on Hair Nation. They play that song. It's in pretty heavy rotation, and it's such a great song. It really is. I mean, it did well, but it probably could have done even better if it had, I don't know if I want to say proper promotion, but it just seemed like it didn't really reach its potential. Did you kind of feel that way as well?
I don't know. I mean, it certainly got a lot of airplay. We were living in LA at the time, and I used to hear it on, I guess it would have been KLOS and all these the rock stations at the time. I mean, I remember the other song that was out at the time that always seemed to be doing just better than us in the charts was Black Velvet by Alana Miles. That was that was kind of frustrating, but well, great song. But I couldn't really tell you about the promotion. I don't know. I mean, it seemed to do well. Yeah, I don't know. Again, that song that was written by Steve Mann and Robin. So whether there was some sort of politics at play there, because the writing had come from a different area, I wouldn't like to say. I don't know. As I say, we weren't actually signed to the record company, so didn't have a complete insight to exactly what was going on, you know, at that level.
With having that hit single, did that elevate the band quite a bit as far as, you know, the types of the size of audiences that you were playing in front of?
You know what, it did, and when we started playing, it was something that we all kind of noticed that, you know, we'd I'm trying to think whether it was with Great White, whatever. I think it might have been when we were out with Great White, but the stuff like "Give Me Your Love," "Anytime," "Love Is Not a Game," all this stuff was getting quite. And "This Is My Heart," that was the other single of Save Yourself, was getting a lot of airplay, and we'd go out and play the set and play all these songs, and the audience was singing along with every word, whatever. Then, you know, we'd get near the end of the set and we'd play "Lights Out," "Doctor Doctor," or "Rock Bottom," and it was almost like you could see the look on people's faces going, I think I've heard this song, but why are they playing somebody else's song? It was like they hadn't made the connection that Michael's past with UFO. And I personally thought, well, this is fantastic. We've got a new band here. This is McAuley Schenker group. It's not UFO. We might be able to actually have a completely new kind of angle here, a new career where we're not relying on playing Doctor Doctor and Lights Out to, you know, for the encores or whatever. And I don't know, it's only speculation on my part, but whether that worried Michael, that it suddenly wasn't about him and it was this new group, or whether management or the record company had some influence. I really don't know, but it was a very noticeable thing. And it was shortly after that that the kind of the direction of the band changed again. And then when they went on to the next album, I wrote a couple of songs for that next album, but I didn't play bass on it. I sang backing vocals on it. And then by that time they'd got Jeff Pilson and James Kotak in on bass and drums, and the other guys, you know, the rest of us were said, well, our services were no longer required, which was a bit tough at the time, but there we go. That's life.
Yeah. So when did that occur? What year did they tell you that you were?
Well, after Save Yourself came in 90, we did it would have been 92. That would have been, because I was still living out in LA and Michael and Robin were out in LA. Bodo and Steve had come back to Germany. They both live in Germany, and I was demoing all the new songs with Michael and Robin, and we used a drum machine in a little demo studio, I think at Chrysalis on Sunset Boulevard. And that's why I ended up having 2 songs on the album, because it was then basically the 3 of us and a drum machine. And then they signed with new management. We were with Doc McGee. And I'm not quite sure what happened there, because again, I was never signed to the management, but they parted company and they went with Left Bank, which was Alan Kovac. And when the new management came in, my understanding of it is they were saying, well, why are you flying these guys in from Europe backwards and forwards, putting them up in hotels, paying them whatever? You know, this is the McAuley Schenker group. We've got McAuley Schenker here. We'll just use session guys on the album. It's simple, you know, and that's pretty much what happened, as I understand it. And so we were basically told our services weren't required, and they did the album, you know, with a couple of session guys, with James Kotak and Jeff Pilson, you know, who did a great job, a fantastic job. I can't fault it. But it just seemed that. For me, I think at that point, some of the audience were thinking, well, this revolving door is kind of going around a bit too fast here. We're just getting used to band members, and then there's no continuity. It's just every time it's a different lineup, and I think that affected the 3rd album. But then I suppose I would say that because I was a bit miffed that I wasn't in it, you know.
Yeah. Obviously, must have been happy that they used 2 of your songs on the record,
Yeah.
even though you didn't play bass on it. Yeah.
Yeah, and I was still friendly with them. I went back in the studio after, Kevin Beamish, funnily enough, who I'd known because he'd done the first Lionheart record in '84. He did that third album, and they were doing it at Sound City in LA, and he and Robin asked me to come down and put my high harmonies on everything, you know, which I was more than happy to do. So yeah, so I did that.
That was a pretty difficult time for rock music because that's when in America grunge was the new fashion. And you know, you guys could have recorded The Dark Side of the Moon and still, you know, it probably wouldn't have really got a response at all, just because people weren't listening to that type of music. So
I know. I mean, after after I wasn't needed in MSG anymore, I had a couple of bands. I had one fantastic band with called Royal Blood with a guitar player called Alex Mazzi. I don't know if you know him, but
yeah,
fantastic, super guitar player. We wrote some great songs, and we showcased for record companies, and they came down, and we could just sense that the time had gone. If it had been even 5 years earlier, that band could have gone on and got a major deal in its own right. You know, we had a great singer, a great band, and we had a good bunch of songs. I had a load of songs which I'd written for MSG left over, and they were reworked within Royal Blood, and Alex brought his stuff to the party, and yeah, so that was a shame. And then I played with a guy called Stuart Smith, who's got Heaven and Earth. I don't know if you heard the Heaven and Earth stuff. The band was called Midnight at the time. It was pre-Heaven and Earth, but there was a lot of the same guys. And I've known Stuart from back in the UK because he's British. And then I played with those guys for a while. And then I just kind of got a bit disillusioned with it all, and basically ended up moving back to the UK in '93. And so, yeah, and then didn't play for a couple of years. But and then when I got back to the UK a couple of years later, I got a phone call to go out with The Sweet from Andy Scott. And then yeah, I was basically filling in on bass for them for on and off for about 18 months. So that was kind of fun.
well, yeah, what was that experience like playing all those classic songs?
Fantastic. It was great. It was quite a bit nerve-wracking because, you know, those guys, they played the songs thousands of times, and basically they just sent me a tape with a cassette tape in those days and said, here's the set, you know, you've got a week to learn it, learn that. Oh, and by the way, you've got to sing the harmonies. Yours is the third or the fifth part harmony on that, and we'll see you at Heathrow Airport in London on Friday. I'm like, okay. The first show we did was out in Germany, and I only met the drummer about 5 minutes before we walked on stage, you know, with no proper rehearsal. So that was kind of a challenge, but it was great because, you know, they're not the most complicated songs in the world, but fantastic songs to play. And, you know, for what was basically a pop band, by the time they were rocked up on stage, it sounded great. And yeah, and of course, at that point, Steve Mann was playing in Sweet. So I've been playing on and off with Steve, you know, for so long over the years that it's, yeah.
Yeah, and then so what happened after Sweet? What did you do from that point?
I'm trying to think. I mean, just to backtrack. I mean, so around the time I was joining, right at the time when I joined MSG, I'd just come off doing all the backing vocals for Def Leppard for Hysteria, which the guys in Def Leppard were kind of old friends of mine. I lived in Sheffield for a while. In fact, when we had a band up there, a band called The Next Band, with Frank Noon, who played on Def Leppard's first EP, and a guy called John Lockton on guitar, who was ended up being Neil Carter's replacement in Wild Horses, funny enough. We were a three-piece band. I did lead vocals, bass, guitar and drums. And Def Leppard were kind of, they were sort of a year or two younger than us and just starting out in Sheffield. And then we made friends with them, and they used to open up for us at these little funky little gigs we were playing around Sheffield and around my hometown in Lincolnshire. And then, of course, their career kind of went like that. But, you know, we kept in touch with them. And I actually did one song on Pyromania, Rock of Ages. I did some background vocals on that. And then when they were doing Hysteria over in Dublin, Joe called me and asked me if I'd come over. Originally, I was going over for a week, and I ended up spending about six weeks over there, or 2 months, just flying over on a Monday morning, back to London on a Friday night, and did that from sort of September '85 to January '86, and did the whole of the Hysteria album and a couple of others which surfaced on later albums. So that was fantastic experience. Working with Mutt Lange was just, yeah, fabulous.
Wow, I forgot about that. I do remember reading that you did backup vocals for that. Yeah, as far as working with Mutt Lange, what was that experience like? I mean, everybody, from what I've read, he's like very much a perfectionist, and it sometimes drives people crazy.
Well, I mean, I found him, certainly didn't drive me crazy. Yes, perfectionist, but a really fun guy, easygoing guy, laughing, joking. It wasn't that, some sort of strict taskmaster, except the work got done. I mean, I've said this before, people ask me about it, but to give you an example of what it was like, the first 2 days I was there, we sang one word, which was women, from the song Women. And then the next 2 days we sang Men. And it was that literally we sang that because we were stacking the vocals up so many times and using slave reels in the studio. We'd fill one 24-track tape up, bounce it down, another one, bounce it down. It just got crazy to get that. And that's how they got that huge backing vocal sound, the Def Leppard vocal sound, which everybody since has tried to copy. Yeah.
Wow. So obviously Steve Clark was in the studio at the time, and we all know what happened to Steve, the tragic end in his life. What was his state of mind like during that recording? Did you see any indication that maybe he was headed in the wrong direction?
Well, it was well known. I'm trying to think, was it before that or after that? Because we, with MSG, we opened up for Def Leppard in Europe. We did a whole tour with them. No, that was after the album, actually, after the album came out. But I mean, I've known them, since before. I mean, literally, I was there when they auditioned Rick Allen for the drum stool or whatever. We'd known them since before they'd done a gig. Even they were just friends, and we knew that Steve liked to drink, and it was fairly obvious. He wasn't there when the time, getting back to Dublin and doing the Hysteria. He wasn't there a lot of the time, but he was there. He would show up. He never really sang on the backing vocals, but he would be around the studio and around the hotel where we were staying. And yeah, there was a lot of drinking involved. It's kind of sad. I think he obviously had some sort of personal demons, and that was his way of dealing with it. It was a real shame because he's a lovely guy, and yeah, what a tragic waste. I mean, what else you can say about it? Yeah.
Were you at all surprised at how well received Hysteria was and how it stood the test of time?
Well, no, I knew it was something special when we were there. I mean, you could just tell, when something's good. I mean, obviously, I was. Rick had just had his accident and lost his arm, and they'd had the false start with Jim Steinman, Whistleord in Holland, and just scrapped months and months of work and started again. And they'd spent so much money to do it that I think they said at the time it's got to sell whatever it was, 4 or 5 million copies just to break even. It cost them that much to do, but. You sensed that this was going to be something special. Obviously I didn't know exactly how special it was going to be and how well it was going to take off. And, for their sakes, thank God it did. So
take some of those Mutt Lange practices and start using them yourself. Like on your next record, did you, make your band members sing the same word over and over again for a day?
Yeah, I have to be honest. Yes, I did. The next sort of couple of albums I did, or next load of songs, all had these vocals where we're screaming, and ended up losing my voice, and because that's tough. And of course that is actually the reason that Joe wanted me to go over and do backing vocals, because I was effectively his substitute, because they were doing lead vocals. He liked to sing in the evening because his voice was better in the evening, and we'd do backing vocals all day, and then he would do lead vocals in the evening. And he obviously couldn't sit there screaming women, women, you know, thousands of times throughout the day. His voice would have been shot for lead vocals in the evening. So I basically came in to add, you know, replace the fact that Joe was missing from doing the backing vocals. And then, you know, and then he would come back. And, you know, I remember we'd come in the next morning and say, oh, how do you get on last night? Oh, really good. We got a whole sentence recorded, you know. Jeez, this album's going to take a while.
Yeah. Well, I guess the last question I have for you, Rocky, and thank you very much for your time. This has been a very interesting interview. My last question for you is, since you've experienced so many really amazing things in your career, have you ever thought about documenting them in a book?
Well, thought about it, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, I will give it some consideration at some point. I don't know, but
Rocky, one other thing I wanted to talk about before you leave is the newest project that you're involved in. It's called Grand Slam, and it features Lawrence Archer on guitar, who played in UFO, and also you were in a band with him called X UFO. So tell us a little bit about the new project, Grand Slam. I know Lawrence was in that, you know, back in 1986, I believe.
well, fantastic, except that all I've done is learn the songs at home. Lawrence lives in Spain, so there's a bit of a logistic issue there. We've got some shows coming up. There's one in Dublin, in Ireland, on the 19th of August, and then in Scotland on the 21st. So, I mean, I've learned all the songs, but it's one thing learning them at home and another thing playing them with the guys. So we've got to get to rehearse at some point. But yeah, I've known Lawrence. As you said, I had a band X UFO with him, which then became House of X, and we did a live album from some festivals in Europe, which was basically old UFO songs, and then we did a record of originals as House of X, and that was with Danny Peronel, who was the keyboard player in UFOs, No Heavy Petting, Clive Edwards on drums, who's now in Lionheart with me, and Lawrence. We've got that going in about 2011, yeah, and so I haven't been playing with Lawrence for a couple of years, and they wanted to change bass players a few weeks ago, and he called me and said, well, you know, have I got the time? Would I want to do it? And I said, yeah, sounds great. So because you know that there's no kind of gigs in the diary, really. Certainly for Lionheart there isn't. We're starting another album with Lionheart, and I said to Lawrence, as long as you don't have a problem with me being in Lionheart at the same time, then I'm 100%. I'm there. And he said, no, that's cool. I mean, when I was in Lionheart, I was also in Air Race. You know, there's none of the bands are kind of full-time jobs, if you like, and so I like to kind of just be involved and get out there and do something. So. Fantastic opportunity. I mean, Lawrence, when he resurrected Grand Slam, I mean, yes, as you say, and he co-wrote all the songs with Phil, and so you know he has just as much a right to play that material as anybody apart from Phil, who's obviously not around. So you know, some people may think the music is great bunch of players in the band, and so I'm really looking forward to getting out on the road with that as well as hoping Lionheart are going to get back out there.
All right, well, that sounds good. Rocky, thank you very much for your time, and so hopefully we'll see you over here very soon. Thanks for your time, Rocky.
Thank you, Thomas. You're welcome. Bye
All
now.
right, see ya.